So what's new, Katie?
Well, we're in the midst of the weirdest weather patterns ever, but thankfully,
Facts.
right? Thankfully, this weekend was really nice because I participated in the Indie Book Crawl. That's
Ooh.
Indy Y as in Indianapolis, and then Indian like, you know,
Yeah,
India.
yeah.
Get it?
I got it. I got it. I got it. That's fun though.
Yeah, the goal of the book crawl is basically to go to as many locally owned independent bookstores that are participating as possible. And
Nice.
I was shocked that Indianapolis had 36 participating bookstores.
Oh wow.
That's Indianapolis and like the greater area. So like there are some
Sure,
in the
sure, sure.
suburbs too and stuff. But that's a lot of independent bookstores. And a lot of
Yeah.
people are under the impression that, large big box bookstores, Barnes and Nobles and whatnot are they've killed off the small bookstore, but apparently not so. Or that
Yeah.
the digital age has killed off books in general, but also not so, because there were
Oh yeah.
tons of people on this book crawl.
Books are having a resurgence, I feel. That's fun. I mean, physical media in general, I think, is making a big comeback in a big way. I was so irritated because over the weekend, I've been on a Hunger Games kick lately in preparation for the new Hunger Games film coming out later this year. And so I was rewatching all of the original Hunger Games movies, which I have the first two on DVD, but then I don't have Mockingjay Parts 1 and 2 on DVD. But it was on Peacock, so I was like, great, I'll just watch them on Peacock. So I watched the first one, like on a Friday. And then on Sunday, I went to watch the second one, and they had removed it.
What?
Yep.
Are you serious?
So literally in a day, I lost access to the second movie, and now it is available nowhere. I mean, you can pay to rent it, right?
Yeah,
You can pay
right,
like a
but
Google Movies or whatever, but it is available nowhere, and I lost access to it within a day, and I'm so annoyed. And I think that is part of what is fueling this trend to get
yeah.
back to physical media, because it's like, oh, if some service decides that they no longer want to have whatever on their platform, then it's
Right.
just gone.
Yeah. No, I've literally been thinking about this a lot more over the last couple of years too, especially when I realized that some streaming services have taken it upon themselves to alter original versions of things. And I mean, another good example of this before even streaming, right? It used to irritate the bejesus out of me that the Star Wars movies, the original episode 4, 5, and 6, when you bought them on DVD, you could only buy them with like the added CGI.
Yes, with the
and
Jabba the
stuff.
Hutt scene. Yeah.
Right. I remember thinking, but this isn't what I remember watching for my child. Like, I want the original ones too. Like, I want to watch it the way I remember it. And the only way that you can do that is if you have the original VHS copies, because, that was just a choice. They never released.
Yeah. Which I have the VHS copies, but
Yeah.
I don't have a VHS player.
A VCR, right? Yeah. So one of my little side projects is to start collecting more DVDs and even some VHSs, and then also to have both a working DVD and VHS player in the house and to go. But then I was thinking about this weekend because we watched a couple of movies, and since the Oscars just happened.
Yeah.
So I watched Sinners, which was excellent.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah, really enjoyed that. And then we watched Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh yeah.
And also really enjoyed that.
Really
and
good.
I was thinking like, man, I would own these. Like, I could picture owning these movies and watching them again. And then I was like, I bet they don't release them on DVD. Like, do they?
Yeah. I don't know.
Do they release DVDs anymore?
That's a good question.
And so now I'm kind of also having anxiety about future me not having access to the media that's coming out today. You might watch a movie that was released by Netflix or Hulu or something, and then someday it just wasn't popular enough, or like they have to get rid of it. And that movie will only exist in your mind from when you watched it and never in any other capacity.
That is crazy. I have thought about that to bring it back to books,
Yeah.
because I got a Nook e-reader. Like I was on the Nook train, which
Huh?
was like the Barnes and Noble e-reader. I
Version,
never
yeah.
had a Kindle. And then Barnes and Noble stopped making Nooks. And so now you can't buy like a Nook, but they still have, like, I still have a tablet that I read off of and I use the Barnes and Noble app. So I still have access to my books that I bought
Mm-hmm.
through the Nook. But I am a little concerned if they stopped supporting physical device creation, are they eventually just going to stop and then I will lose
Yeah.
all of my
All the
books?
books. Yeah, that you purchase. That you
Yeah,
paid for.
that I've purchased since, yeah, like
Yeah.
basically 2012,
Right.
pretty much exclusively bought books that way.
Right. So
Yeah,
that makes me wonder too, like, and then what's the other option, right? They might offer to let you download them, but then you have to physically store them on something.
right. And I have to make sure that I maintain some sort of device that's compatible
Right.
with
That can
that.
that can open the
Right.
file.
Because how many like video games and stuff can you no longer play because you don't have a computer
Right.
that can
Right.
play them, right? So,
Right? Yeah. So
yeah,
that's why I said it is crazy to think about it. I think it's something that I kind of took for granted. And I'm all for the digital age. I mean, literally, my job is the digital age, right?
right. Digital records. Yeah.
Right? Moving away from paper and all of that kind of stuff. But there is something to be said for physical media. And I think, yeah, I've just made it a personal goal to be able to access and collect pretty much all physical types of
Hmm.
media. I want to get a tape player too, just in
Yeah.
case.
I still have
I
a
don't know.
cassette player. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I want a cassette player. I want to make sure I have a CD player. I want to make sure I have a DVD player and a VHS before they
Hmm.
become totally obsolete. I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
We're two long-distance best friends with a passion for learning about all the things that make everyday life interesting.
With my PhD in geography,
And my master's in library science.
doing deep dives on topics is our idea of a fun time together. We'll share our findings with you on
Researching the obvious.
So today's episode isn't really about physical media. We're gonna diverge pretty strongly here and talk about something that is used every day, which are utensils. Yeah, I have a story about utensils that I don't know if I've ever shared with you from high school.
Okay.
So, did I ever tell you about the time in ninth grade my friends and I decided that we would start collecting an absurd amount of straws from the cafeteria?
Oh, straws. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Where's this going? What did you do?
When I was in ninth grade, me and two of my friends, it started becoming a joke where we would take straws from the lunch line and then we had all these extra straws all the time. And I think part of the joke is because here's a random side story that I won't get into too far, but my mother-in-law was my high school lunch lady.
Uh-huh.
So obviously I wasn't dating her son at the time, but random. So I think it became a joke because like I knew her and we would just like joke around with her and like sneak extra straws behind her back when she was like running the cash register or whatever.
Okay.
And so then we decided that we should have a goal for this extra straw collecting. So our goal became that we were going to, by the end of the year, 2004 straws because that was our graduating year. So it makes
Of course.
the most sense,
Yes.
obviously, as a ninth grader. And then you might be asking yourself, well, where did one store all of these straws that we were collecting? Well, we found an empty locker that no one was using. And so we just kept putting all of the straws into the empty locker that we found.
Okay.
And so by the end of the year, we had collected 2004 straws and we were very proud of ourselves, me and my three friends. And because I guess we are jerk ninth graders, I don't know. We put all of the straws into a gift bag and then gifted them back to the lunch lady
Oh my
at the
God.
end of the year. But I would like to say that she had the last laugh because this is the best part of the story. At my graduation party, like 3 years later, right, in
Uh-huh.
2004, me and my three friends that were the original straw collectors were hanging out in my backyard at my parents' house at my graduation party. And my future mother-in-law slash old lunch lady comes to the graduation party, and she has a giant like box that's like wrapped up, and
Mm-hmm.
she was like, oh, here's like graduation gift for you all. And so we opened the graduation gift, and inside she had made 3 bundles wrapped in ribbon of straws, and they were the original straws. And
What?
the reason I know this is because we had taken like gel pens and like written on some of the straws,
Yeah.
like class
Yeah.
of 2000 and stuff. We had like
Right?
written on the wrappers, and they were in those bundles. And so we just laughed hysterically because she had kept these
She
straws.
sat on that for 3 years and was waiting for that
Yes, and then
moment.
gifted them to us for
Oh
graduation,
my
which
God.
is quite honestly the actual best. I don't even know what you want to call that. Like,
Yeah.
should they have started playing like Rick rolled us? Like, she started playing Never Have a Kid
Right?
Like, I don't know. Like, what?
That's commitment, is what that is.
Yep, that's my utensil story. Because honestly, I can't top that. I can't top
Oh
that
my
level of
God.
like retribution of all of these stupid straws and then giving them to us as a graduation gift. I can't top it. Can't top it.
Well, you know what my question's going to be? How did you count all those straws and make sure that you were accurate?
I mean, we laid them out on the lunch table. I counted them in
Oh, okay. All right.
clumps.
So you didn't keep a
In
running
clumps.
total as you collected them.
I don't think so. I definitely think it was like, oh, are we close? And then we'd like
Yeah.
just count them up every once in a while.
Okay. Okay. Logistics. I just need to know the logistics.
I know.
Straws. I love
Yeah.
me a straw. I prefer a
We
straw.
know. We know you love a straw. Yes.
But first.
Yeah. But I figured we should probably start with like the basics, right?
Right.
Okay.
What most people in the Western world used to eat.
Yeah. We can also talk about the basics of the non-Western world, i.e. chopsticks.
Yes.
Or hands.
Or bread. I did do, in preparation for this episode, I did a quick Google search to see if there were any utensils I didn't know about, just in different areas of the world. Because, like, I was thinking, okay, we've got forks, spoons, knives, and then, you know, in most Asian countries, or a lot of Asian countries, they use chopsticks. So I was like, are there any utensils that I didn't know about that they use somewhere? And the Google search revealed it was really just those two plus hands or bread would be what's used to eat. So if you're not using chopsticks or you're not using the fork, knife, spoon combo, then you're probably either using your hands or you're using a piece of bread to grab the food.
Nice. Have you had Ethiopian food before?
I have not, but I know that that's how you eat it.
Yeah. They have this like very thin kind of spongy bread that you use to eat with, and it's delicious.
Yeah. Honestly, I would be all for switching to a bread utensil.
Yes.
I'm all for bread as the dish, bread as the utensil, bread, just bread.
This feels very sustainable to just use bread.
And delicious.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you shouldn't be surprised to know that knives are basically the first utensil ever created.
They seem like they're the simplest to make too. Like they're just kind of straight and sharp.
I mean, essentially knives were just, you know, the first kind of utensil because from the beginning of Paleolithic era, people needed to be able to have something to cut things.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, some of the earliest tools that humans have are sharpened pieces of stone or pieces of metal that are used to cut things. And so eventually throughout history, knives evolved into essentially just a item that people would carry on their person that would be used for protection, but then also for like other tasks, cutting up your food, skewering things. Like they just stabbed stuff on the end of the knife. A knife was just like a utility item that everyone carried. And basically, up through the Middle Ages, people brought their own utensils with them. So, like, if you went to eat at an inn or at someone else's house, you brought your own utensils. And essentially, that was usually just people carried a knife on their person and then they used that to eat. So, and of course, I'm talking about the Western world, right? This doesn't apply to Asian cultures. But basically, you just would cut your food if you needed to cut it, and then you'd use your hands to eat, or you would stab something on the pointy end of the knife and eat it off of that. Like that was basically how people were eating until the Middle Ages, essentially.
Okay.
The one exception is spoons, because you can't really stab a soup.
Right. The knife is not as multi-purpose as you thought.
Yeah. So aside from the knives, right, spoons were actually one of the earliest tools to be invented. Yeah, so you have knives first, the earliest Paleolithic tool. And then spoons were also really early on the scene. People would use things that you find in nature that have scoop shapes, like shells and things, to like scoop up water or soup or whatever. But the earliest examples of man-made spoons, I bet you can't guess where they're found.
Egypt?
Correct!
It's always Egypt. They're smart.
Yes, so the earliest versions of man-made spoons are from Egypt, and you also find really early references to spoons in ancient Indian literature as well. But, there's a lot of trade happening between ancient Egypt and ancient India and the Middle East. So spoons are definitely around in these early times, pre-Christian times. And so by the 1st century CE, the Romans had designed 2 types of spoons that they made of bronze. One was a spoon called a ligula. It was basically a spoon with an oval-shaped bowl, which looks very similar to what a normal spoon today looks like.
Okay.
And then the other kind of spoon they had was a cutlery, which is a spoon with a perfectly round bowl that was typically used for eating shellfish and eggs.
Okay. Like maybe a boiled egg?
Yeah. To me, a round bowl seems like a soup spoon, but
I'm not sure. That's what I would have thought too.
But apparently this round bowl was used for shellfish and eggs. And so since the Romans were using these spoons in the 1st century, they basically went throughout all of Europe and everywhere the Romans lived, right? So essentially spoons become fairly common at that time. And then starting in the 14th century, so we're talking 13, is when they started making spoons with pewter or iron. Prior to this, spoons were made with more expensive types of metals, so like the bronze or gold or silver. But in the 14th century, when spoons were constructed with pewter and iron, that's when pretty much everyone could afford them. So spoons became just a standard thing to have as a utensil starting in the 1300s. So basically up from the beginning of human history until the 1300s, people were using sharp knives that were pointy and spoons
to
as
scoop
their utensils.
things.
Yes. So you might be wondering, well, what about forks?
Yes.
So forks are actually, relatively speaking, very new, which I did not realize.
Yeah. I guess I kind of take it for granted, like forks just being there.
Yeah. They didn't catch on until much, much later. And in fact, in the US, forks didn't really catch on until the mid 1800s.
What?
Yes.
They were just using knives and spoons up until the mid 1800s?
For the most part. I mean, like the normal people.
Right.
Obviously, there's exceptions when you're really wealthy, but normal people. So the fork journey surprised me a lot. So let me go into this whole situation. Yeah, they didn't get widespread traction until the 1800s, which to me is crazy because I just assumed we were using forks a lot longer
Yeah.
than that. Prior to the year 1000, you may have seen a tined utensil, but by tined utensil, I mean for cooking purposes. So you might have had like a really big, like skewer fork type of thing to cook with, but not something that would have been an individual using it to eat. Okay. Right. But then the earliest instances of fork use by like an individual person who was eating it was during the Byzantine era in the 1000s, but they didn't look like a fork looks today. Essentially, it was a two-pronged mini Triton type of utensil. So it was like a stick with like two prongs at the end. Really, the only instance that we have from history of these being used is this woman, I'm not going to pronounce her name right, but Maria Argyopolina. She was the Greek niece of Byzantine Emperor Basil II, and essentially she moved to Venice to get married to Giovanni, who was the son of Petro Orsilio II, the Doge. What do you call that? Anyway, but so she showed up to her wedding in Venice with a case of golden forks. But the clergy in Venice thought that these were incredibly indulgent things to use. Like, they basically made fun of her coming from Byzantine and being like, wow, this woman, she's so extra. She has her own case of golden forks that she has to eat with. Like, what is her problem? Literally, here's a quote from one of the clergy members. God, in his wisdom, has provided man with natural forks, his fingers. Therefore, it is an insult to him to substitute artificial metal forks for them when eating.
Clergymen are always so on top of like killing anything that is new or different.
They're like, you have hands, you have a knife. Why are you using these golden forks, you crazy uppity biatch?
You're insulting God.
They were really not fans. And she unfortunately passed away 2 years after her wedding. And so basically the clergy were just like, well, yeah, you lived a life of frivolity, so no wonder God punished you. And then they just like got on her case for living this frivolous life with her gold forks. They were, So she did not bring forks in a way that was going to catch on.
Wow. Who would have thought cutlery could have been so divisive?
Yes. So anyway, later on, we get to the 1400s, and forks had made their way by this point to Italy in the 1400s. Basically because other things that were happening in the 1400s in Italy were things like pasta became a food, because pasta, like noodles, came from China. And so Italians weren't eating that until the 1400s. Pasta becomes a food. Tomato sauce becomes a food, because again, that didn't really exist in Italy till the 1400s. And so people were looking for ways to eat noodles, and unfortunately a knife and a spoon just wasn't really cutting it very well. So forks, like tined items, started to become popular in Italy. And so when Catherine de' Medici arrived from Italy to France to marry Henry II, she brought several dozen silver forks with her. And so, of course, France being at the time the most cultured, fashionable people in the world. Yes, this is when forks start to become a little more en vogue. However, forks at that time were pretty much only used when you were eating something that would have been too messy to use your hands. So again, like in Italy, it was pasta, but in France, it was desserts that were fruits in syrup. So they would use the fork to like skewer out the fruits. To eat them, and then the syrup, they could use a spoon to eat the syrup.
You don't want to be getting your fingers all syrupy.
Yes, but don't worry, the church also was annoyed at this.
Of course they were. Of course.
So apparently the syrupy desserts and fork use became associated with courtesans eating them. And so the church, of course, was like, no, you can't use a fork because that relates to courtesan behavior and is therefore sinful and feminine.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever you want to cancel something, just blame it, like associate it with prostitution.
Yes. And also probably women.
Yeah. Both.
So forks became associated with femininity. And so men especially were actively discouraged from using forks because in order to be manly, you just had to stab things with knives.
Right. And to take big fistfuls of food. Use things.
Yes.
Use your hands.
Stabbing things with knives is the way to be masculine, so we can't use forks. Anyway, so what ends up happening, I think, is kind of interesting. The reason why forks took off. So we're still in France. Fast forward to the 1660s, and France starts to develop table etiquette as an intimidation technique. So
that is the best form of psychological warfare I've ever heard. I mean, seriously. And it works. Damn it. It works.
Yes.
There is nothing worse than sitting down at a fancy place and seeing a bunch of things that you don't know how to use and feeling like a total idiot.
Right. Like, you're like, I'm a rube. I don't know what's happening here. Yeah. Yeah. So France, because I don't know, I guess they sucked at actual warfare, were like, we will fight you with our manners and etiquette. So they essentially started doing these things where they would create all these dinner rules that they would then only disseminate to like ruling classes. So basically, if you got invited to a table and you didn't know like the latest dinner rule, then you felt really inferior.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they would also change the rules a lot because, you want to like be ahead of the game. As soon as someone learns a new rule, then you
need to be on trend. Yeah. Or you're left behind.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So there's like kind of a two-for situation happening here is we have these dinner rules getting developed. And then this guy, Cardinal Richelieu, he got tired of watching people stabbing their food in an unsophisticated way with their knives. And then he also thought it was super gross, which I kind of agree, to watch people pick their teeth with their knives.
Yeah, ew.
Yeah, ew, right? Agree. So he ordered his staff to basically round off all of the tips of all of his knives that people would use at the table. And he insisted that when people came to the table, they would only use these round tip knives because he got super annoyed at everyone like being gross with their pointy knives at the dinner table. Since they no longer had tips on their knives to skewer their food, then they basically had to start using a fork because they had nothing else to like eat their food with. And then fast forward to 1669, King Louis the 14th, he makes pointed dinner knives illegal. Like he creates a decree where pointed dinner knives are no longer allowed. And so when you go to the table, you cannot have a pointed knife. And so all of the knives that were being used for dinner services all had to get rounded off, and any knife that was manufactured moving forward for eating purposes was not allowed to have a pointed tip. They had to have a round tip. And so this obviously led to people kind of being forced to use a fork because they didn't have pointed knives at the dinner table anymore. Okay, so how did this take off in the US? Why did it take till the 1850s? So this is all brand new, right? So it takes a while to like get out of the upper classes of the French, right? So during the colonial period of the US, obviously the US was obsessed with France. We were like, they thought we were like, oh, France is the coolest ever, right? We don't like England. We're obsessed with France now, trying to make France happen, I guess. So we were the US was importing their silverware from France. And so we were getting these rounded tipped knives. What we were also doing is we were copying French styles and French etiquette and this sort of thing. And so the trend at the time in the 1700s was to use a knife and a spoon if you didn't have a fork because you weren't wealthy enough to have forks to eat your food. And the idea was that you would have the knife in your right hand to cut the food, and you would just use the spoon to like hold the food in place essentially while you were cutting it. And then you put the knife down and move the spoon over to your dominant hand to like scoop up the food that you just cut in order to eat it. Right.
Okay.
And so that style in etiquette purposes of eating is known as the cut and switch method, where you cut with your dominant hand, put it down, and then eat with your dominant hand. Right. So this is how in the US, people started learning how to like properly eat their food in a proper way. What is funny, which I didn't realize, because this is how I eat my food. I cut and then I put my knife down and then I take my fork. Right. Okay. So what's funny is that because the French were the French and they needed to change their etiquette rules all the time in order to stay on top of it, they changed that rule after it was sent to the US. Then they changed it and created a style of eating known as the continental method of eating, which is where your knife is always held in your dominant hand and your fork, because they were using forks, is held in your non-dominant hand with the tines facing downward. And so you cut and then you put it on like the food on the back of the fork and then bring that up to your mouth. So you never release the utensils out of your hands and you don't like switch them. So apparently that continental style of eating grew popular in France and the UK, but the US, we never changed our style of eating from the cut and switch method. So today, the rest of the world, when they are using a fork and knife, eat in the continental style, and we still eat in this like zigzag cut and switch method in the US. And we're the only people that do that.
That's really interesting. Because I've definitely seen what you're describing, and I've tried eating that way before, because there's something about it that seems fancier, like I should be eating like that and not switching my fork to one hand and then the other, whatever. And there's something about it that feels like, I don't know, clunky or something. So I have done that, even though it feels unnatural to me.
I just thought it was funny because apparently that's like one way you can immediately spot an American is if you are in a different country and people are eating in the cut and switch method and not the continental method. And I had no clue about that. But anyways, forks. So yeah, basically the US had spoons for a long time, and then eventually it got to the point where we were importing forks, but well into the 1800s, forks were still considered a challenge or a source of confusion, or people did not understand.
They just weren't on the fork train.
I have a quote here from someone from Maine in the early 1800s that says, "Eating peas with a fork is as bad as trying to eat soup with a knitting needle." So
well, people... I mean, peas, I guess peas are kind of not the best.
Yes, they're very still anti-fork. Like through the early 1800s, the US was just eating with their spoon and their knife still. But by the 1850s is when forks started to become universally accepted in the US, and the spoon gets sidelined in favor of the fork. And now we basically only use spoons to eat like soup. And ice cream. Yeah.
Those are the two things that immediately come to mind.
Right. But we still eat in the cut and switch method.
Right. Interesting.
The rest of the world who uses a fork and knife. Yeah. So, man, forks, I feel like, had quite a journey.
Yeah. They, against all odds, really became a utensil that we use, despite the church trying to kill them multiple times.
Right. And basically what became popular because the French wanted to spite people. I don't know.
That's the way to summarize it.
And the US still eats weird because we're learned how to eat with a fork from the French.
We're out of the loop.
In the 1600s, and then didn't get the memo on the latest change to etiquette.
Yeah. By the time we did, it was too late. It was too late.
Too late. We were like, nope, we've gone too far. We're just going to eat this
really
way forever.
Funny. That's really funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That
Mhm.
is, wow. And I'm really shocked just at how recent forks are,
Yes.
especially in the United States.
I know. They've only been around for less than 200 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Yes. So it's this is very interesting history. And one thing that stuck out to me was the evolution of the knife that you
Mm.
mentioned and
Mhm.
rounding the tip instead of using it to stab things,
Yeah.
because that also plays into the history of chopsticks, which
Oh.
is what I looked up. Because, like we were saying, if you're not using a fork, knife, spoon combination, you're probably using chopsticks,
Mhm,
your
mhm.
hands, or bread. And so if you're using chopsticks, you're probably in an East Asian part of the world, because they
Mhm.
originated in China in the Shang dynasty, which was roughly 1766 to 1122 BC.
Ooh.
The
So that's
right?
early,
Yeah,
before
old.
Roman. Yes, before the
Yes.
spoon becomes popular.
The oldest archaeological evidence of chopsticks are actually bronze, and they date
Mhm.
around 1200 BC.
Mm.
At that time, though, they were most likely used for cooking, so not as an eating utensil. You
Mhm,
might use
mhm.
them to stab or skewer food. You might use almost like just two sticks to grab something and
Mhm.
move it. And they think that they started to be used for eating around 400 AD. So even though chopsticks have been around for quite a while for cooking purposes,
Mhm.
not used for eating until around 400 AD. The reason for this, I found a couple of different reasons. So I'm not sure how certain they are of this, but let's say maybe all of these played into it.
Okay.
One was around that time, rice became more widespread across Asia.
Mhm.
Previous to that, it was the grain of choice was mostly millet, which was made into a
Mm.
porridge, and they would have used a spoon to eat
Mm.
because of the size of the grain.
Okay.
As rice began to be more cultivated, and those medium or small grained rices that are sticky and kind of come in clumps, it makes a little bit more sense to use chopsticks instead of a spoon necessarily. So it's a different, kind of a different texture.
Right, right, right.
So there was that. Then I also read that food that you were eating was being cut into smaller bite-sized pieces. So what I imagine is that it was a situation kind of like what you had described at first, where there might be a large hunk of something in the table and people were cutting off pieces of this and then eating it with their hands. So at this time, food was being cut before it was being eaten. They said because of the population boom in China, because they were trying to feed more people,
Mm.
that they might have been cutting it, almost rationing it out at the table instead of just letting people
Yeah. Well, it
cut
makes
their
me
own
think of like
pieces.
just stir fry type foods
Yeah.
that are more common. It's not the same
Mm-hmm.
thing as like a big roast
Right.
or something,
Yeah, there might have been some culinary reasons, but
Mhm.
things were being cut into bite-sized pieces, which chopsticks made a lot of sense to use.
Mhm.
If it's already cut up into small pieces, then you can just use the chopsticks to grab a piece for
Right.
yourself.
Right.
And then the other thing that I read that helped them become a more popular eating utensil was that Confucius was apparently a vegetarian,
Okay.
and he very much disliked the use of knives being used to stab food at the table, because he said it drew up, images of basically slaughtering
Mhm.
animals, and that was counter to what the experience of dining together should be. It was supposed to be like this happy,
Oh.
positive thing, and that the knives were kind of this aggressive, almost violent utensil that he
Mhm. Mhm.
disliked. And so
Okay.
he preferred using chopsticks, apparently. And so,
Interesting.
yeah. And so that may have also helped to kind of spread the popularity of using them as a method of eating.
Huh. Interesting.
It was interesting because you mentioned the guy who got tired of people picking their teeth with the
Yeah.
knives and
Yeah.
stabbing things. I mean, it kind of reminds me of
Yeah.
that, but he had kind of like this ethical or philosophical reason behind
Yeah. Like a
why he
total,
didn't
yeah.
care for
A similar
the
thing, but
knives.
different vibes.
Yes. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, so the use of chopsticks then spread throughout other Asian countries from China, but the different Asian cultures do have slightly different chopsticks. They're all very similar. It's two sticks.
Mm-hmm.
But in China, Chinese chopsticks have more blunt ends and less pointed, which
Okay.
they said maybe because Confucius was against
Yeah,
that
didn't
whole
want pointy
pointy
things.
and discouraging the stabbing. They have blunt ends and they're thicker and they're either round or square. And they're approximately 10 to 11 inches long, which is actually pretty long compared to.
Yeah, that's like almost a ruler.
Yeah, yeah. So they're very long. So Chinese chopsticks, they're long and they're thicker and they have blunt ends. In Japan, their chopsticks are 8 inches for men and 7 inches for women, presumably because women have smaller hands, or just because
we're daintier.
Yes, yeah, something along those lines. They're also more tapered at the end as opposed to blunt. Also, side note, Japan was the first to create disposable chopsticks made of wood or bamboo. So typically in China, they were making them out of either wood or metal. And then in Japan, they started making them more commonly out of wood that was easily disposed of, I guess.
Yeah.
So like what we would use at a Chinese or do they give chopsticks at Chinese takeout places anymore?
I just got some the other day.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like the disposable ones in the little red package.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So those would have been more of a Japanese thing. But anyway, and then in Korea, their chopsticks are 8 to 9 inches long. They're more flat and rectangular. And they more often use metal than anything else for their chopsticks. I read because they say it preserves the flavor of the food better.
I guess that maybe makes sense because you're not getting the wood flavor, but then you're getting a metal flavor, so I don't know.
I know. I was thinking about my stainless steel straws and how I do prefer those to plastic or paper because I feel like whatever I'm drinking through that straw tastes better when it comes through the metal. Or maybe I prefer the metal-y after, if there's going to be an additional flavor.
Yeah.
I would rather it be the metal.
Like drinking out of a can.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. So, but in general, chopsticks, mostly wood, sometimes lacquered. They would paint them. And then in the wealthier classes, they might be ivory, jade, coral.
Fancy.
Yeah, brass.
It's like the lady with
agate.
her gold forks.
Right. Or silver. Silver used for chopsticks, too.
But that's crazy. Chopsticks have been around for so long and just haven't really changed much.
Right? Well, also interesting that they were a cooking utensil in East Asian countries, and meanwhile the fork was a cooking utensil in other countries. And it does make me wonder if, like you mentioned about like stir fry and stuff, if the foods had different needs.
Well, and I also think, like you mentioned rice, but I also think just noodles were invented.
Noodles, I know,
right?
We're talking about noodles, and that makes sense too. Even from a cooking perspective, cooking noodles with chopsticks, and stirring them and stuff and being able to pick them up, it makes more sense.
Yeah, agree. Because, just the types of foods that were being consumed is not easy to eat with a knife. And then forks take on popularity kind of with noodles and sauces. Yeah. Interesting.
It is interesting how that also just stayed as the status quo. I guess no psychological warfare with their...
Exactly. They didn't have the French sitting around trying to figure out ways to intimidate people with their utensils.
It makes sense in a lot of ways. It's kind of genius in their simplicity and their utility, right?
Yeah.
So why would you change something that's perfectly functional? And I mean, obviously they use spoons too for soups and to scoop things, but then the chopsticks take care of everything else.
I was also thinking though, when I was looking up spoons and forks and knives, about these utensils that are sort of combination utensils.
Oh, yes.
And of course I thought about sporks.
Yeah.
But, shouldn't be any surprise at all that sporks are very new because forks barely got caught on recently. I was thinking that the history of the spork would be a lot crazier than what it is. I don't know. Maybe you will think it's crazy, but I actually thought that the fork was a lot more interesting. The spork. Spork's just funny to say. But yeah, essentially.
Yeah, side note on that, you know what sporks make me think of?
What?
Is in high school, there was a kid in my class who started his own band, and his band was called Spork.
I mean, it's a really good band name.
Yeah, and he used to like steal sporks from the cafeteria and stuff and like wear them, like ape them to his clothing.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's funny you bring that up because the utility of sporks in cafeterias is really the reason why they pretty much exist.
Okay.
Sporks were not the first like hybrid silverware to exist. Even dating back to medieval Europe, there was a thing called a sucket fork, which was a utensil that was essentially a spoon that had a couple prongs on the handle. So it was like a spoon, and then the handle had a prong to skewer.
Oh, so you like dual-ended.
Yeah, you like flip it. And that again was kind of this idea when they were eating those fruits with the syrup, because it was sort of like combine it to eat them. Yeah. And then in the 19th century, in American silverware, you had terrapin forks, which were forks used to eat turtles, but they were sort of like a fork spoon combo sort of thing, but smaller. And then there were apparently ice cream spoons, which also were essentially a spork-like object. In 1874, a man named Samuel Francis, who was from Rhode Island, he invented a utensil that was like a spork, but it also had a blade on the side to make it also a knife. But that didn't really take off. And then that sort of three combo thing was repeated in 1943 when an Australian named Bill MacArthur invented and patented what he called a splade, which is a knife and spork combination. And he made that after he saw a magazine photo of a woman trying to balance carrying all these different utensils to like a picnic. Okay. And so apparently splades are very popular in Australia as like a barbecue utensil. So if you're having, I don't know, shrimp on the barbie.
Shrimp on the barbie?
You might use a splade, because after, let's see, as of 12, which was the most recent statistic I could find, over 5 million splades have been sold in Australia. Sporks, though, let's see, the word spork was trademarked before the actual utensil. The word spork was trademarked in 1951 by Hyde Ballard. I don't know why he was just trademarking that name. And then in the 1970s is when the actual spork was trademarked in the US by the Van Brode Milling Company. So it wasn't until the 1970s that actual utensil was trademarked, and they made them out of plastic. And what ended up happening is Kentucky Fried Chicken, which we talked about in our fast food episode.
Fast food.
Yep. They saw the utility of the spork, the plastic spork, because they were like, wait, this is a great disposable item that we can have at our very popular growing fast food chain.
Yeah.
Because we have these sides like mashed potatoes and coleslaw, and this is a very good, like, versatile item. So they basically were responsible for mass marketing the spork, and the spork taking off as a popular, specifically plastic utensil. And so afterwards, Taco Bell now has sporks, Popeyes, and then, prisons and cafeterias and stuff all started issuing sporks because they saw the, like, utility of a plastic disposable combo item.
I was just going to say, I don't know that I've ever seen a spork in a material other than plastic.
So, because my family is weird, I'm fully aware of titanium sporks because several people in my family own one.
Okay. Like for a camping situation, or just because it's cool?
No, like I have one in my silverware drawer, but I know that my brother also has one.
Okay.
But they are common for camping utensils as well.
Yeah.
A lot of like mess kits will have a spork in it that are now made out of either metal or a more heavy duty,
like a robust
plastic
material. Yeah.
But KFC apparently
I was just going to say, how
for
many
mass marketing the spork.
How many trends is KFC? I mean, talk about a cultural institution.
Yes, I know.
Because Japanese Christmas, KFC, sporks,
Mm-hmm.
fast food chain
That's
restaurants,
right.
building on the interstate. I
Yeah,
mean,
highway. I know. I
they
know.
are much more than fried chicken, I'm gonna say.
Yeah. KFC, I feel, is the real innovators here, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Amazing.
yeah.
Sporks. Okay. Also did a little bit of research on unusual utensils or
Ooh,
utensils that we might not use
so
anymore.
fun. Yes.
Yeah. And so let me tell you, the Victorian era is rife with them.
Why am I not shocked? The Victorians just didn't have anything better to do,
Yeah.
right? Like they were just sitting in mourning for
Right.
years when their husbands died, so they just had to figure out new utensils or something.
And now that I know the history of the fork, this would be shortly after forks are actually being used on a regular basis. All of these other utensils come into play, which
Okay.
a lot of them are forks.
Maybe the fork wasn't standardized enough so that it allowed people to have different types of
Maybe.
forks.
Yeah, or they just like to be really specific and
I mean,
have
that's true too.
unnecessary things. So I did read because I kind of was like, why the Victorians again? Like these
Mm-hmm,
weird
mm-hmm,
Victorians.
mm-hmm.
So I did read that, similar to what you were talking about with the French, using it as an intimidation technique or keeping up to date on etiquette.
Yeah.
So in the Victorian era, social standing was very important and also social etiquette, right? And in
Mm-hmm.
America in particular, social classes were less set in stone because it's all new money, right?
Right.
Like
Okay.
over in Britain, you have families that go back generations that have been, important in these social circles or socialites, part of the royal court. So in
Mm-hmm.
America, not so much. A lot of that's wiped clean. And so
Mm-hmm.
one of the
Mm-hmm.
ways that Victorians kind of solidified their social standing was through rules of etiquette. And the
Mm.
more, in tune you were with the etiquette and doing things the proper way, the higher your social standing was. Now that I think about it, it makes a lot of sense because I mean, like, man, they were really hard on the rules, the calling cards and the way you pour tea and what's allowed and what's not. And,
Yeah.
and if you messed up, if you stepped outside those social boundaries, you were done,
Yeah.
outcast. Forever.
Well, it's like in the TV show Gilded Age.
Yes,
where she makes
exactly
a big
that.
deal about getting a French chef for her
Yes.
kitchen so that she can have the right
Yes.
style of dining.
And her whole goal is she's trying to break into the New York social elite that have been established. And even then, that was like old money versus new money, right? Like her husband had made his fortune more recently than the other New York socialites.
Mm-hmm,
so, yeah. So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting perspective that I hadn't really thought about before as a reasoning for all of the rules and how they're following them and why it becomes important.
Right.
And cutlery and table settings and things like this were a big part of etiquette, hosting dinners. Mm-hmm. And kind of putting on this big production. And so to do that, they also developed some very, very specific utensils that I imagine if you had, you were considered more, trendy, more socially proper, more. Yeah. So keep that in mind as we go through this. Okay. So the first one was a bread fork. So specifically a fork for bread that you use to get bread out of a bread basket.
Okay. I was waiting because I was like, wait, am I supposed to eat bread with a fork? No. Okay.
No.
Just to skewer the bread to put it on your fork.
Just to skewer the bread from the bread basket because you don't want to be using your hands or anything like that.
But you can't use tongs for this? You have to use a fork?
No, a bread fork. A bread fork.
Okay.
Which was like a larger, kind of wider, 3-tined fork. That's all it looks like.
Okay. I would be annoyed that my bread got holes in it.
Right? That it was punctured? I agree. A lettuce fork, and those were really wide. So specifically for like a piece of lettuce, if you were getting a single piece of lettuce.
Were they sharper? Because I feel like it would be useful to have like a little sharper of a fork to skewer lettuce.
No, from what I read, it seemed like this was more of a large flat fork that was used to like place under a large leaf of lettuce.
To lift up the lettuce instead of skewering.
Right. Or to get yourself a portion of like salad. So it's kind of like a scooping fork, but it's still a fork. I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
A mango fork, which
Oh.
this one kind of
We're
made me laugh.
consuming mangoes actively in the Victorian era?
Yeah, it was in the list of Victorian age, but it
Oh,
was
all
just a
right.
tiny fork with a longer middle tine that was used to pierce the bottom center of a mango through the seed, and then you turn it over to eat it like a popsicle. And what they said is that this was happening in Latin America. So
Oh.
I don't know if they were using sticks though, like a skewer to eat their mangoes. So like it might have been one of those things where it was like an exotic
Oh.
thing to have mangoes.
Okay. And then you eat it like a popsicle. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It was on the list. Then of course your olive fork, literally just a tiny fork, because there was an olive spoon as well, which is a spoon that has a
Oh,
hole
yes.
in the center
I
the
definitely
size
have
of
one
an
of
olive,
those too.
which that makes sense to me. So you can scoop a single olive out and
Hmm.
not have the
Hmm.
brine or whatever. So that makes sense. But the olive fork is just like literally a tiny fork you're eating an olive with,
To eat in that.
I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
An olive sized fork. Yeah. Okay. All right. Then we had, of course, a pickle fork, because you wouldn't want to use an olive fork with pickle fork. But the pickle fork, yeah, you also didn't want to be touching pickles with your hands.
Sure.
So it had a longer handle, 3 tines, and then little barbs on the side of the outside tines, so that when you stab the pickle, it holds the pickle on the fork. And then the longer handle to get them out of the jar as well.
Okay.
Then you had a gelatin or an aspic server.
This is making me think of horrifying Jello foods.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It was
Okay.
just for gelatin dishes.
What?
It was a spoon, a shell-shaped spoon with a pointy top, and it was like a little bit sharper on the edges so that you could, scoop
like
into the gelatin
Yeah.
dish. Yeah. But it was wider and flatter too, so that when you're getting the gelatin, it doesn't fall off of the spoon. And then you have to have asparagus tongs. So asparagus was kind of a new deal, I guess, then. And so there was very specific ornate tongs that they used to serve asparagus.
But not for bread. Can't use tongs for bread. Just for asparagus.
You need the bread fork. Fork for bread.
Okay.
So the asparagus tongs, I saw several different styles. They were just longer, flat tongs so that you weren't puncturing the asparagus and you could pick up multiple stalks at once.
Okay.
I saw one that actually had little asparagus shaped scallops so that you could.
So that the individual stalks would like rest in the.
Yes. Yep.
That's so fancy.
Yeah. And then just other variations on tongs that were smaller and more delicate, I guess, to pick up the asparagus gently.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, and then a few others that you mentioned an ice cream fork. They also had ice cream slicers. So apparently the ice cream scoop wasn't invented until 1897. So before that, they had this big, kind of like, I don't know, a pie server looking thing, but that would slice off hunks of ice cream.
I have an ice cream scoop that is more of like a slicer. It's like kind of flat.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like a flat, like kind of blade type of thing. And you just kind of carve off a hunk.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's what they would have used. They also had cake or pie forks, which was a regular fork, but the tine on the very left is slightly wider. And it almost looks like it has a piece missing towards the top, like a chip off of it. Don't ask me why, but this is supposed to make it easier to cut into the cake and eliminates the need for the knife or the piece of pie. So I don't know why.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know unless I tried one out. Yeah.
Right. But also could be doubled as a fish fork, because there were definitely like fish forks as well. But that you could use the cake fork also as a fish fork because it was good for picking away the fish skin or small bone.
I suppose fish is probably flaky like a cake in some
I guess
sense.
So. Yeah.
It seems weird to compare a fish to a cake, but yeah, that you try to like flake off a piece.
And then a couple of other non-fork. This one made me laugh. Grape scissors.
What?
Well, that's what I thought at first, but it turns out that apparently they would serve grapes in bunches on the table, and the grapes were used to cut the stem so that you could cut a small bunch for yourself and then move that small bunch onto your plate for consumption there. Because I was
Okay.
also picturing tiny little scissors that like were cutting grapes.
Yeah. What? Okay. All right. I see.
But no, these were specifically scissors to cut grapes off of a bunch of grapes.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Yep. Also egg scissors. So those are used.
What are we cutting an egg?
You know, a hard boiled egg, and you use them to cut the top off.
The shell.
Yeah, the scissors, one side of the scissors is a hole, like has a hole. It's like a circular hole that goes on top of the egg, and then the other side is sharp and slices the top of the egg off.
I see. Okay.
So that then you eat the hard-boiled egg.
Right, because you're eating an egg in an egg dish or an egg cup. Right, of course. As one does. A tiny little cup for your singular egg.
And then last but not least, one that people might actually be familiar with, snail tongs, which are very specific as well, which always makes me think of Pretty Woman.
Yes, I was just thinking that, where she doesn't know how to use the tongs and then the snail like flies up.
Yes. Slippery little suckers.
Waiter like catches the snail in his hand.
That's what you think it is, which is small tongs that are exactly the size of a snail to hold the shell, while you then use the snail fork to scoop out the inside of the snail and eat. So
yes, snail eating.
Yeah. And that's just a small, I mean, those were not all of the utensils. I'm trying to think. We're pretty basic with our utensils, though we do have a bazillion straws because I love a straw. So
yeah,
I invested in all different sizes and lengths of stainless steel straws.
Straws are also surprisingly old though, right?
Yeah, we were shocked, shocked/not shocked to discover that straws go all the way back to ancient Egypt.
Like most things do.
And they were using them to drink beer, and they built in a little filter on the end to drink the beer and avoid drinking the sediment at the bottom.
I was going to say, I can't imagine drinking beer through a straw, but I guess if you're trying to avoid getting all the like chunky stuff, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, because you don't want to be tipping that up to your mouth.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. That's like when you drink coffee and don't know there's coffee grounds in the bottom. But what were they using? The ancient Egyptians, they were using like reeds as straws, essentially.
Yeah,
hollow.
And
oh no, like, okay, this article from National Geographic says thin tubes made from precious metals. Ancient Egyptians were using metal straws.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know in the 1800s in the US, we were using pieces of ryegrass as straws.
Yeah, which are just like hollow grass like tubes.
Right.
Apparently they also dissolved really easily.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I know what we're talking about. They're like those things that you find like out with cattails and stuff. Those things are really flimsy. But the first drinking straw patent in the US was in 1888 because this guy, Marvin Stone, was drinking a mint julep with his piece of ryegrass as a straw, and it disintegrated. But he was a paper cigarette holder manufacturer, and so he decided he could make something better, and so he wrapped strips of paper around a pencil and glued them together, and that was how he started his drinking straw group, and then started mass producing them.
Genius.
And then the bendy straw was invented in the 1930s because this guy Joseph Friedman apparently was trying to watch his daughter struggle with drinking a milkshake through a regular straight old paper straw.
Oh dear.
I know. And so he figured out a way to take the paper straw and bend it. And so he patented his invention for the Flex Straw company. But flexi straws became really popular because hospitals started using them because it was easier for people, like patients lying in bed and stuff, to be able to get liquid if they could bring the straw to their mouth, essentially.
Yep.
With, like, being able to bend it.
It's a good innovation. Still paper though, right?
Yes. Those are still
paper coated in wax, we should say. So that was part of Stone's invention as well. It's like there was like a paraffin coating to keep
Yeah.
the paper from disintegrating immediately.
Right, because he was so annoyed about the reeds disintegrating.
Right. And the grass flavor. He felt the grass flavor was interfering with his julep.
Julep. I mean, that makes sense, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then plastic straws, it wasn't until the 1960s that plastic straws became really popular, which makes sense. I feel like plastic everything started cropping up. And you'll be excited to know that in 1969, the Friedman Flexi Straw Company, which was making the paper flex straws, they sold their company to the Maryland Cup Corporation, which is a Baltimore-based company. So don't worry. Got that Baltimore reference. Yep. Anyway, they were the first to produce a wide variety of plastic straws, and they became the country's largest plastic straw producers, which continued until 1983. And plastic straws became popular. One, they were cheap and more durable than paper, but then two, fast food was becoming really popular, and it was a lot easier to stick a plastic straw into a cup than it was to stick a paper straw into a cup. So I guess it wasn't specifically KFC related, but the growth of fast food,
yes.
Yeah, also created, the demand for plastic straws as well.
Right. And then full circle, now using plastic straws is clearly an evil act.
Yes.
We have to save the turtles and use paper instead.
Paper straws. Or just bring your own.
I was just going to say, that's the real
reusable
solution.
Straw.
Right.
It is. And also harkens back to people just bringing their own utensils.
When you said that, I was like, that's actually really smart. Like, why don't we do that today? Like, why don't we all just travel with our own little utensil set?
Yeah. My mom gave me for Christmas a couple years ago in my stocking, like a travel utensil set.
Yeah.
That is actually really cool. It had a fork, spoon, knife, a pair of chopsticks, and two straws, one straight and one like a bend. Bendy. And all made out of metal. And it comes in a little carrying case. And I've definitely used it.
Some of the plastic silverware out there too, like if you get takeout or things like that, it's tiny. It's really
They're
thin
so flimsy.
plastic. Yeah, flimsy. That was the word I was looking for. And if you're eating any kind of food that has some like substantial texture to it, you're gonna break your plastic fork or your bend your plastic spoon.
Yeah.
So nope. I agree.
So,
I think that's really smart. And I carry a straw with me because there's lots of places now that just don't offer the straw or use the straw anymore. And I love it. I just whip that out, wash it when I get home. It comes with a little brush.
Yeah. Well, I honestly am simultaneously shocked at how old some utensils are, and yet how new other utensils are.
Right? I also just love the juxtaposition of the history of cutlery in the West versus like basically Asia that's been using chopsticks and spoons just forever.
Right.
And never did anything else.
We need to create the most asinine utensils ever in order to show our moral superiority. And Asia's like, okay, I'm just going to eat the food, actually.
Different forks. So many different serving spoons. And they're over here like, we already invented the perfect utensil for everything.
Right. Exactly. We don't need anything else. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Honestly, though, what are we
doing?
For real. Like, I know. What?
Well, maybe the solution to all of this is, like we said at the beginning, just go back to bread. Bread is the ultimate edible utensil.
Right.
Why are we not just making a million types of bread for each meal?
Right. And you can still eat soup with bread. You can eat everything with bread. Yeah. It's just bread. Thank you for listening to Researching the Obvious. To learn more fun facts about everything that we're researching, follow us on Instagram at Researching the Obvious Pod, all one word. You can also follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you know someone that you think would enjoy listening to all of our findings, please feel free to share or give us a review. Researching the Obvious is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Emily Fekete and Katie Nakanishi. Tune in next time to hear more obvious facts.